In New York, customs officials fight flow of scotches and ryes from overseas. Some is confiscated after ships have docked, but many a crew and cargo is captured by Coast Guard units patrolling open waters 12 miles from shore. Running is another profitable business of the day, but dangerous and not always successful. This is stuff that's just off the boat, all right.
Hello, I'm COD President Paul Ferrace, and I'm back again, this time with the wandering curator, Evan. And although this is very definitely submarine related, it involves, of course, again, my fraternal great-grandmother by the name of Cimino. Apparently, I'm not the first member of my family to have a submarine, although my submarine is much larger and more sophisticated. But apparently, my great-grandmother, my father's grandmother, had her own submarine, or at least had custody of a submarine, much smaller. But, you know, scale is just one element. I mean, submarines are submarines. You have to have a ballast chamber and fins to control it, and neutral buoyancy, negative buoyancy, all those factors. Apparently, my great-grandmother's submarine was roughly the size of a torpedo. In fact, growing up as a boy, my father would often tell me the story about how he, as a young boy, when he would visit his grandmother's house on 9th and Orange, and we have some footage. Evan and I were just visiting there for another part. Maybe I'm not going to suggest to the wandering curator how to create his videos, but we've got some footage there of that area. It's now completely overgrown, and whatever buildings were there a century ago have been long erased. But anyway, in the backyard of her house / Italian candy store, she had lots and lots of sugar purchases during Prohibition, because somebody was making something that wasn't quite candy. Anyway, but being mob adjacent, as sadly some of my relatives were, they were involved in the bootlegging and liquor importation business, because here in Cleveland, Canada, which didn't have Prohibition in the 20s and early 30s, is just about 80, 90 miles north, and the lake really isn't that deep. So what they would do is they built liquor smuggling submarines, roughly the size of a torpedo, and Evan was able to uncover a fantastic image of a liquor smuggling submarine in, of all places, Mechanics Illustrated, 1926. And the image that we discovered is pretty damn close to what my dad recalls as a young boy. Basically a torpedo-shaped thing, roughly about that long, because my dad was down here many times and saw torpedoes and said, yeah, that's pretty much close to what I played on as a boy. Now, apparently the point of the liquor thing was you would tow it behind a ship, or not ship actually, anything on the lakes is called a boat. But your steamboat would pull these things behind it, and it had a large chamber for your liquor, and I don't believe it was bottled. I believe we're talking bulk liquids. And it had a flotation chamber, it had fins, and it had a little bit of negative buoyancy, meaning that it wouldn't float stable, it would sink. The fins would be angled in such a way that the forward momentum of the towing ship would keep it relatively neutrally buoyant, so you tow it behind. But the good thing is, if the revenue cutter came toward you and signaled for you to stop, when you came to a stop, that liquor submarine would then sink down, still connected by a chain or a rope. And if you were really worried about being boarded and closely inspected, you could cut the line and it would sink to the bottom, which might be no more than 30, 40 feet deep. And apparently these guys thought of everything. They had a wooden block float connected to the submarine, if you will, unmanned, by a rope, and that would float to the surface to mark the spot so you could come back later, find it, and retrieve it. But anyway, so yes, man's ingenuity, particularly in pursuit of evilness, is unparalleled. But anyway, so these liquor smuggling submarines were quite the thing on the Great Lakes, and perhaps even between Havana, Cuba, and Florida. But anyway, to bring in liquor. Of course, with the election of FDR, Prohibition ends in 1933, and our liquor submarine is no longer needed. So it ended up in the backyard of my great-grandmother on 9th and Orange. And, you know, weeds grew up around it. And my dad, being a young boy at the time, he was probably 11, 12 years old. You know, it's something amazing. And, you know, every schoolboy had read Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So here's, you know, Captain Nemo's submarine in Grandma's or Nona's backyard. And they would play on it. It was rusty boilerplate thing. My dad talked about the rivets, and there was a hatch in it. And, you know, he's never questioned, you know, why this was there. I guess apparently, you know, he just assumed everybody's grandmother had a torpedo device in the backyard. But anyway, it was there. And then my dad said, because I asked him, I said, well, what the hell happened to it? He said, you know, one day it was gone. And I got to believe that in the Depression, you know, scrap iron, you know, had some value. So this interesting artifact of American history and my family history vanished for the sake of a few dollars in scrap. But hey, you know, I wasn't around to say anything about it. Now, we've generated some AI images to kind of illustrate, because I know Evan, being, you know, a young whippersnapper, was saying, well, you know, have any pictures of your dad with the thing? I said, come on. You know, you either got photographed at your wedding, and if you were whacked at your funeral for the people that couldn't come to the funeral. Nobody took pictures like they do today. So, but we thankfully were able to curate some good images through AI to illustrate what we're talking about. So, you know, here's the cutaway Mark 14 with the massive air flask. And, you know, if this is analogous to the liquor submarine, I gotta say, you could put quite a bit of hooch, Canadian Club, in here. And, yeah, that would be quite the little boon. You know, cut it with whatever you cut it with, and sell it out the back. Of course, you know, my dad does remember that as a boy, during Prohibition, he would visit his grandmother's house, the candy store. She had a candy store on 9th and Orange. And my dad said that, you know, he'd be sitting in the window watching the traffic go by, and a big black limousine or, you know, car would pull up, and some guys in heavy coats would get out, and fedoras. They'd come in to visit Grandma. Apparently not Grandpa, but Grandma. So this was a patriarchal situation. But they would see my dad, a young boy, in the window, and they, you know, hey, how you doing, kid? Hey, you know, and put $5 in his pocket. My dad loved that. Of course, you know, usually a few weeks later, the guy that put the money in my dad's pocket would be on the front page of the newspaper, you know, as being gunned down in some mob hit or something in Cleveland. So, yeah, not fun times, not proud of that aspect of the family. But again, I think my great-grandmother was mob adjacent. She was running a candy store, because you could buy lots of sugar. They didn't really scrutinize you too much. Although my family was not big on candy, so there's that. So somehow somebody was using the sugar for something. But anyway, and she probably made some extra money as a liquor smuggling torpedo storage depot storing liquor storage, submarines or torpedoes. Anyway, Evan, I think that's all we have to talk about that aspect. So these things had alcohol tanks. So really a Mark 14 is not unlike that liquor thing, because submarine sailors would tap the fuel alcohol and try to prep it to turn it into torpedo juice. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, that's my great-grandmother and the first family member to have a submarine.